Hi, I'm Limo Milan, and in this video we're going to look at Ableton Live's Beat Repeat. So Beat Repeat is a device we can drag onto any track that has audio on it, and it allows us to grab the audio at any time and repeat it in different ways. It's a useful tool for both studio and live performance. So to demonstrate it first, I'll play you the audio example I've got, and then I'll drag in a beat repeat to the actual main master track to affect the whole sound of what we're hearing right now. So if I grab beat repeat and add that on, the preset that loads in does quite a lot straight away. And then if we go to the actual preset loading here, we can try out a couple of different variations as to what it's capable of. Alright, so you can hear it's quite fun in terms of what it does. It really reworks our audio. And if you just explore it for the first time, the presets are a great place to start. But I want to cover how we can make it do what we expect it to do first, and then add aspects of variation over time as well. So if I actually loading the initial device itself, it will load in our default preset. And let's just go through some of these controls. So we can choose how long the interval is to when we're going to do some beat repeating. So this first selection here chooses how long the range is of when we're going to have a beat repeat. So we're going to start off with a bar. So every bar, it has the capability of repeating parts of that audio. Then we have an offset control, which moves where within the bar we're going to choose to have those repeats. So if I set it to the middle section there, it will be beat 3 within the bar. So beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, beat 4. So put it in that position there. And then we have a gate control, which is basically like how long it gets held on for when it's doing its automated beat repeating. So if I set it to be exactly a beat long, it's going to be quite a clean musical measure to begin with. The last control that's good to know about is this chance control. At the moment it's at 100% chance, or what's often referred to as probability. It's completely probable that it's going to happen. It's going to happen every time at the moment. If I don't want it to happen at all, I can set chance to 0. And if I want it to only happen on different occasions, you've got any range of how more likely or unlikely it is to engage from one bar to the next. So let's have a listen to what that sounds like with those settings. So we can hear that every third beat is doing a repeat for us. So at the moment, you may notice that my master level is actually peaking, because what's happening is we're hearing the original signal alongside the beat repeated version, and therefore it's two signals combined, and it raises the actual output level a little bit. So you can either offset that by turning down your track, or if you want to get a little bit more into this, we can choose the behavior of how it blends or moves to the beat repeated version of what we're playing with here. So we have a mix control here, and we've got two ways of trying to make that more discrete within the blend of the original and the beat repeated sound. So in mix mode, I can simply just turn down the volume of the repeat. So that's one method. Another method is to stay in the mix mode where it blends original and beat repeated modes, and then we instead use a filter, so at least the repeated version may not be as dominant in the lower frequencies. The lower frequencies will always be more effective in raising the decibels of a signal than higher frequencies. So we could turn on the bandpass filter here and either use the individual controls for width and frequency, or grab the actual XY dot here and tune it in. So I'm going to do this by ear while I listen to it. So we're only hearing the hi-hats being repeated there rather than the snare or the kick, whatever happens to be on during that point that it grabs the audio. Another aspect of control we have of the behavior of this volume over time, or volume that's different than the previous volume, which was a fixed level, is we can use this decay control. So rather than every repeat being the same volume, it can have a step down volume and create a decay effect. So I'll increase that as we play it, and you'll hear what that sounds like. In fact, I'm just going to change the gate length so it's actually going to be half of the bar when we do this, so it's a bit more obvious. So there's a visual aid here to let you know what's going on. It's stepping down the volume of the repeats as it continues them until the actual gate length ends and we go back to just hearing the original signal. So that brings us to our different behaviors in terms of what it's doing. Right now it's doing that blend action of input and beat repeated signal being blended together in mix mode. But if we go into insert mode, it's like when we do beat repeat, the original signal is blanked out and we hear the repeated version only. So I'm going to just back that decay off again, so it'll just be a fixed kind of register volume of every repeat being the same, and then we'll play with that decay control again. Now in this context, it might make more sense to not have the filter on, so we hear just a stuttered version of the original signal with no filtering added to it. Okay, it's an experimental approach. We can start looking at some variation to this. So let's back off the chance control. So you see it's not going for every one of those potential points in the bar where it could be engaging the beat repeat. It's skipping them in a random factor. It's less likely. So our last version of this is that it actually goes into a gate mode. You'll notice that the display here doesn't show what the shaded version of the original signal is and then the highlighted portion which would be beat repeated. It only shows the actual beat repeated version. So we're just going to hear the signal in the beat repeat stage of things. So you can hear that's quite effective already to maybe create a less dense version of your idea. It could be that you turn this on and off and use it as part of a performance tool. So like a DJ can do, you can alter how busy the song is at any given time, either on a whole track or on given instrument tracks. So far we've covered the intervals, choosing the range that it can then choose the offset position within the range, so the bar, and then the offsets within the bar where we choose. How long it beat repeats for is how long the gate is on for, and then the chance is controlling how likely it is for it to do it from one of these intervals, a bar, to the next bar as well. So let's have a look at the actual beat repeat speed that it's running at, which is our grid here. And again, if you change it, the visual aspect of this will alter as well. So if I change it to eighths, we'll have a different rhythm. You can hear immediately the density of the effect changes a lot more when it runs at a much more rapid pace as well. If you want to go for a variation like the chance control here for the actual when it will beat repeat, we can do a variation here of the speed of the beat repeat itself. So that grid control can be varied. If you go for lower values, it will deviate from the current setting by a smaller amount than if we go for a higher amount of variation where it can leap to both ends of the possible rates that it can beat repeat at. So you notice there's been different variations there. There's been sort of straight measures and there's been triplet measures too. And if we don't want triplets, if we don't want to move into a triplet feel, we can disengage the triplet behavior. So we'll only do variations to ones that are within straight timing. So we don't change the feel too much of what's going on. So the beat repeat itself has a transposition control, and that's what this pitch dial is for here. So we can basically tune down the sampled and captured version of our sound when it goes into the beat repeating action. So if I just do this down a few semitones, it should make sense. So let's just take variation off for a minute and go for a slower rate, because that seems to sound quite nice. Okay, so the last aspect of the pitch control that we have is this pitch decay control. So if I increase that amount, it should be quite obvious what it's doing to the transposition that the pitch dial is doing. So our last feature that we're going to look at here is variation mode, and this is just a last add-on to the variation behavior of beat repeat. So we've looked at the range that variation can have by applying either a small amount or 0 if we don't want any variation, or a small amount if we want it to only have a small movement of a higher and lower value of the grid setting. And then we can go to the more extreme range of it potentially going all the way to the left and all the way to the right in terms of how different the rhythms can be. But when those rhythms kick in within the beat repeat behavior is what this is for. So trigger mode as it is will mean that there'll be a variation every time it comes around and engages beat repeat mode. If we go for the, let's say every beat, you'll hear that there'll be a variation change for every beat within the bar. So I've got my gate open for 2 beats, so there's a chance for variation to change twice within that space. And then the more complex version we have here is auto, which basically changes at the end of the last rate used. So it will start with a randomized value, so it can be anything, and then once that's repeated, it will change to another one and then to another one. So there's lots of timing changes within my gate period of 2 beats of the bar right now. So the idea there is you can get really complex rhythms, and it can be used as a useful way of just altering what's going on. So although I've said that's the last feature in terms of how we can set up beat repeat, for live performance there's one more function here. If you take chance away, we can instead engage the repeat mode manually. So like a DJ tool of stuttering when you press a button, we could assign a key to this or a MIDI keyboard to it as well. I'll just click on it with the mouse just to demonstrate it here. But while it's running, when we feel like it needs to go into a repeat mode, so let's say I want it to definitely go into 16th behavior right now, I could set variation to 0. If I want it to have the same pitch, set pitch to 0, and when I want it to happen, just go in and click repeat. So you can see how it can be used quite rhythmically there. It's a really good tool to be able to perform with as well. In a live context, you might want to create a couple of them and all set up to fixed different divisions of the actual beat repeat behavior, so our grid size, and then have them set to different keys. So you can choose to punch in a 16 beat repeat, an 8th, or maybe a triplet based one as well, and maybe a really fast 32 one for those like oscillator grindy noises too. So that's the function of beat repeat. As I say, we can use that as a studio tool, or we can use it as a live performance tool. And you can either keep it running in a varied mode and try and record the output. What we could do in the case of dragging this onto our drum track, if we stick it into our drums here and just mute out the other tracks just so we get some focus on that, I can create a new audio track and call this beat repeated. And then if I tell that one to listen to the 808 core kit, which has the beat repeat on it, it's after the effect we want to capture this. So if I choose to do post FX, I can capture that recording of my beat repeat and then choose to edit that at a later date and pick out the sweet spots of what it's doing. So in this case, I do want it to do lots of variation. Let's keep it the sort of the most dynamic change of the variation within the beat repeat itself, and maybe set the pitch to do some pitch decay too. So we get lots of really interesting changes. And let's take the filter off so I can choose to filter it later if I feel it needs it. I'm going to be recording this while it's actually doing full frequency versions of the beat repeat rather than ones that are kind of EQ'd with the filter. So if I just hit record on the beat repeat track now, and let's just turn chance up and do that again, because chance was down, so therefore I had to manually press repeat. So we'll do that one more time. Okay, so now I've recorded that on this track. We can listen back to that. And if we need to do some edits, we can just drag it back to arrangement view. Put playback on for arrangement view. Single out something that we like. Choose to split that information. And then we can drag and arrange that in arrangement view or drag it back into session view as use it as a new loop base to start a new idea as well. Okay, so that's beat repeat. We've looked at how we can make it predictably alter the rhythm of the audio going into it. We've also looked at how we can create aspects of variation and finally how we can control it in a live performance scenario as well.